Morning.
Chad keeps me honest. If I said afternoon, he'd criticize me.
I think I did that once.
I never forgot, though. It was pretty good, see?
I haven't forgotten some
You
of
shamed me.
I haven't forgotten some of your other answers, too.
My mother used to do that to me, so I hope you feel good about it. All right, good morning. Just this morning, I saw the House Democrats held a press conference to celebrate their first 200 days in the majority in Congress. What I can't figure out is what they're celebrating. What have they actually accomplished? That's not even a question for me. It's not the question about America's asking, but it's a question internally. The own chief of staff, inside to a congresswoman, has actually tweeted a question to challenge any person in America to name them one thing this Democrat majority has accomplished for the American public around their kitchen table. So only internally they're asking to, but now they're holding a press conference. So what I thought I would do, I'd actually go and look at what were the numbers at this moment, at this time, in the last Congress where there was a different majority. So I first looked at the number of bills passed out of committee, because that's where real work begins. That's where the expertise, that's where the voice of everyone across the nation that has elected their representative to be heard. Well, in the last Congress, there were 308 bills passed at this moment. The Democrats, who have celebrated their 200 days, haven't even passed 200 bills out of committee. They're at 184. You know why? It was on display yesterday. I hope yesterday was a historic day. I hope the failure of what they saw, what they thought they would actually try, is the final chapter of this book that they have put us through, the American public, on this Mueller investigation. It was there for everyone to see. If you watched the Democrats themselves on the floor, they would jokingly say that was a major failure. They say, we hope we don't have another hearing on this. But as you listen to their leadership, they continue to try to change the course of an election that they didn't like the outcome to. But they're holding the American public back. You see from the sheer numbers of only 184 bills passed the committee. And this is what's important. Remember the committees that they went to. The Judiciary Committee. And earlier this week, a new Gallup poll showed that a third of our country believes immigration is the top issue currently facing our nation. 1/3 says it's the number one issue. In close to 20 years, only a handful of issues have ever become that prominent in the minds of Americans. Have they had a hearing in regards to the crisis? They first said it was a made-up crisis. And we waited more than 58 days to have a supplemental, to actually have the funds to deal with those who are coming across the border and care for them that they said they cared so much about. Only then, after all this time, after the Senate showed the way by having a bipartisan vote, and the number of times that this new Socialist Democrat majority tried to deny it, did we get the bill passed. The American public knows it's a crisis. The only people who do not believe it's a crisis is the majority party inside the House of Representatives. Then let's think for a moment. In a few short days, we will leave for a 6-week break. But earlier this summer, the administration started the process to get the U.S., Mexico, and Canada trade agreement through Congress. Mexico has already done all the work. Canada, Trudeau, says he's waiting on us. They have broken. He said he'll have to call everyone back to take the vote once we take action. What will this do? Only make our country stronger, more prosperous, create more jobs, make the debate with China even in a stronger position for America, and make the future better than it is today. But they didn't do anything about it. Because one person has all the power, the Speaker of the House. She has not called the bill up, where the other countries have. She's going to go on break. So that wasn't part of the celebration of 200 days. They actually denied the work that America could become stronger. Then let's look when it comes to medical costs. The moment in time when these committees actually worked, the Energy and Commerce, and they found bipartisanship. Every Republican, every Democrat voted to lower the prices of generic drugs. 3 bills just like that. But an odd thing happened on the way to the floor. It went through the leadership. You know what the Democrat leadership did? They made it a poison pill so they could not become law. I don't think they celebrated that today. Another failure on their part. Surprise billing, one of the biggest concerns we have in America today, where you, as an individual, look into your network, go to a hospital for a procedure, but somehow you find out that maybe the doctor is not in the network and you get a bill outside of what your insurance costs are. We haven't dealt with that. I didn't hear any celebration in those 200 days. So it's interesting to me when you look at the day they had yesterday. They had all this anticipation. This was the day Chairman Nadler has been waiting for. This is the day that Chairman Nadler had promised this Democrat majority when he was campaigning to become chairman of Judiciary. One of his strongest platforms in becoming chairman, competing with other Democrats, that he would be the very best chairman when it came to impeachment. He didn't care about the facts. He just wanted to impeach. So he won the vote inside the Democratic conference to become chairman based upon that belief. So he moved forward no matter every time the facts did not lay out. Even when the report came out that there was no collusion, no obstruction, he refused to go down and read the last 6 lines of the report itself. So he held this hearing that was a total failure on their part. Headline after headline shows it, question after question. But what did he do? He came down to a press conference to try to spin it another way. And all that while that he has wasted America's time, there's been a crisis at a border, and he has not moved any legislation to solve it. All that time that there's been a problem within health care, the moment that we had bipartisanship, they wanted to make sure that the bill could not become law. All that time when we had an agreement to make America stronger with Mexico and Canada, they refused to bring it up. So they'll go away for 6 weeks. But what they'll get is the exact same question they're getting from their own members. What have they accomplished? They've done a lot of resolutions. Think for a moment of a resolution that we passed just this week for anti-boycott, divestiture, and sanctions against Israel. The Senate passed a bill. Senate won with 77 votes. Leader Schumer not only voted for the bill, he co-sponsored it. But they didn't run that bill through committee. That's not one that has passed, of the few that they've been able to get done. They decided instead to hold it up and move a resolution, because words are so much stronger than law in their world. And when there was a moment in time after a failure of all day of their hearing in Mueller reports, there was a motion to recommit that could put it into a bill, not for language, even though there was more than 300 people who voted for it, a strong bipartisan resolution. There was a point to take your words and actually put it into law. They stood on the floor and argued against it and voted against it. I wonder if they celebrated that in their 200 days. That they'll say one thing, but they won't carry it out, because maybe they really don't mean it. And then, something that never happened in the Republican majority, for the 4th time, they lost a motion to recommit. If you really want to see the Democratic Party, it's not the Democratic Party of old. It's a new socialist Democratic Party that has an internal fight within itself, that is primarying one another and continuing to harm the American public because they can't get their work done. It's just like the U.S. House of Representatives under their majority has become the U.S. House of Resolutions. So they're celebrating 200 days of doing resolutions, but never could be able to provide law. It's holding America back. Yes, ma'am.
Leader McCarthy, are Republicans going to vote for the budget deal today, and are Republicans no longer the party of fiscal responsibility?
2 questions. Let me take your last question first. If your question about being a fiscal responsibility, in 2011, when the Republicans took the majority and Nancy Pelosi had to hand that gavel to John Boehner, to the unfortunate moment where I had to hand it back to her when we lost the majority, the discretionary funding, which Congress has control over, those 12 appropriation bills, was actually less money being spent at that moment than was being spent when Nancy handed the gavel over. This is a core element of what we fundamentally believe. I believe our greatest crisis in America today is our debt. Unfortunately, we're living in a world where the new socialist Democrats are in the majority. If you look what they had passed in their appropriations and what we'll vote on today is $100 billion less. So yes, even though we're in the minority, we've got to be able, we actually force them to spend less money. Were we able to protect in the riders that are in law? Yes. Were we able to fund the military to begin to build it after what the Obama administration did to do? Yes. But have we gone far enough? No. I want to see more done. So there'll be Republicans who vote for it and Republicans who don't vote for it. But at the end of the day,
$3 trillion when
that is really the goal of mandatory spending. And when you found when Republicans were in the majority, they were the only ones who were able to reform mandatory spending. But unfortunately, we lost that vote in the Senate by 1 vote. We are the ones who have been able to pass a budget when we were in the majority, and in our budgets, they always balanced. I've watched the Democrats, where I've watched Nancy Pelosi as a speaker, show me your budget, show me your values. In those 200 days of celebration, they didn't put on the list that they passed a budget because they didn't do it. The fundamental responsibility of a majority is to lay out a budget. You will never get spending under control unless you have a budget. We laid out a budget every year. The funding that we had control over, we actually decreased. And that's what we will do getting back in the majority to put us back on the path that we have a balanced budget and pay off this debt.
Well,
Leader McCarthy,
Republicans
isn't the issue, though, there's been criticism of the tax cut bill. I understand what you're saying about discretionary spending, but that has contributed to decreased revenues, which is why they had to move up the debt ceiling. You have the presidency. Your president was willing to go to the mat and shut down the government earlier this year on this. Why not take that tack again if that was so successful?
Well, let's take your false premise right here, the tax bill. When I look at states, they get more revenue. I mean, your philosophy of what you're asking me is that government should keep more of your money instead of the individual. The government should take more. Well, what has happened since that tax bill passed when not one Democrat supported it? We're now living in an economy that in the last 50 years is the strongest economy we've ever lived in. Unemployment, for no matter what element or where you live in America, is at the lowest point we've seen. When I've traveled around the world, the number one thing the other countries bring up is we want to do tax reform just like you. We have spurred companies that had moved out of America to move back in. I was just with some this week. They looked at the president when I was standing there and said, you know what we did? We just invested another $40 billion in America. We've transferred where our production plants were in another country and moved back. Why? Because of your tax bill. If you want to measure this tax bill in the end, it's going to provide more. And what's most importantly it's going to provide? It's going to allow the individual to make a decision what they do with their money. So no, I disagree with your question just on the premise itself. Yes, sir.
The premise, though, isn't the premise here, though, that's the reason the Treasury Secretary came up and said we have to move this quickly because they were going to be down to only $250 billion by early September? I mean, that was attributed directly to the tax bill.
No, let me be very clear. Where the challenge lies is Speaker Pelosi, at the whole time the president won in the past when government shut down, he did not want to shut the government down. You take 60 votes in the Senate. Leader Schumer made the decision government had to be shut down. Because once again, the president realized there was a crisis on the border, but what did the Democrats say? It was made up. They kept that philosophy until it was too big, that everybody else in America, even the New York Times wrote an editorial, not once, but twice. But what did the chairman of Judiciary do? He kept the course in his promise that he made, not to his district, but to the Democrats in Congress, that he would be the best chairman ever to try to impeach the president. He ignored the biggest problem that we had. So the president's sitting there, because I was in the room with the speaker, let's solve this problem. You have issues about immigration too? Let's find a compromise. The way government is designed to find. She denied it and would not do it. The president was able to move forward. The president had found in this whole point that here we were, that he wanted to get to a budget agreement that we have met for many months. The speaker would not. The speaker actually moved the Democrats to be writing some false appropriation bills that only delayed the whole process, which we know none of those will become law. The frustration raised to the Secretary of Treasury, he got involved because he was concerned, fiscally concerned, that we knew that the debt ceiling, and it was long before that the debt ceiling would come because extraordinary measures were in the part of. But what are the Democrats going to do? They're going to have us leave for 6 weeks. We could have dealt with this before we went, but the speaker said no, she would not deal with it. So we are where we are, and we put a plan together that had to have compromise. We made sure that the military is going to be able to continue to grow. We've watched what has happened around the world, from China and Russia flying into areas of South Korea they've never flown before, to Iran boarding other boats. It is an unsafe world, and we have to make sure our military men and women have all that they need.
Yes. Leader McCarthy, you made a reference to the internal struggle in the Democratic caucus. You've got the speaker meeting tomorrow with AOC. Is there a lot of pressure on her in that meeting? And, you know, does she have to decide or declare once and for all impeachment, yes or no?
I'm not sure what the speaker's going to do. I think the speaker's meeting with AOC not based upon impeachment, but just trying to get her conference in line. I understand that Congresswoman AOC, she gave T-shirts to all the freshmen. The only reason I know is the freshmen who tell me they'd never wear it because they think it's some socialist symbol on it. It's an internal fight. I know a lot of those individuals are spending more time primarying one another. I watched on the floor. They've lost 4 MTRs, motions to recommit. There's division. If you watch the progressives, how upset they were when we were able to get a bipartisan vote on the anti-BDS bill. But it was only a resolution. I watched today where we're supposed to have a number of other bills come up, but they can't bring them up. They can't get the votes. It's more than an internal fight. This is not a family fight. This is a war and a feud. The Socialist Democrats inside that party are taking the party over. They have been successful. They have defeated those in the past, defeated the number 4, Crowley. They're beginning to win in the seats underneath them. They're primarying others and motivating. I saw a recent poll that the strongest endorsement in a Democratic primary is first a former Democratic president and second Congresswoman AOC. Never mentioned the Speaker of the House. There's a question at time I hear on the floor. They question who the actual Speaker is. That's why they're having a meeting. It's eternal. Why would you ever even bring up impeachment after yesterday's hearing? That should be put to bed. That is over. We watched it. We heard it. We've read it. What more can they make up? The only people that want impeachment are the ones who are sitting inside this chamber on the Democratic side. The American public have made their decision. Poll after poll, you see it. But why will they put the American public through this instead of doing the job that they should be focused on? From creating a better economy with USMCA, solving the crisis at the border, or health care. Yes, sir.
I'd like to get back into the compromise, though. You said that the national debt is like the biggest crisis facing the country. This has always been a really tough vote for Republicans since you took the majority in 2011. You know, a lot of the so-called Hell No caucus that wouldn't vote for any kind of debt limit increase. As you look to get the majority back, isn't this a really tough, tricky vote for your incumbents to take and support? I'm just kind of wondering, will you get half of your conference to support this vote?
I don't believe we're going to get half of our conference to support this. Look, our conference, our fundamental principle is to make sure we have a fiscal house in order. We understand we live in a house that has to find compromise. This is not the bill that we would write. We're not in the majority. What it will do, not to just half the number of members, but the entire body will motivate us even greater to show the contrast in the plan. Take, for instance, if you ask this question, you just watched on the floor that the Democrat passed a number of appropriation bills. Well, this is $100 billion less. So even though we're in the minority, at every moment we're trying to make government live within their means. Unfortunately, we have a socialist Democratic Party on the other side that wants Medicare for all to actually break Medicare. We watched this new Democrat majority. I'm sure they put this on their list of their 200-day celebration, where they're literally going to take more than $4,000 from individuals in America and put it into their own campaigns to run their negative ads. Those are their answers. So the contrast is very clear, but the principle is still the same with the Republicans, to get us to a balanced budget. Yes, ma'am.
What do you make of California cutting a deal with the automakers on fuel efficiency standards away from the Trump administration?
Well, I think it would be better that we'd have one standard across the nation. California does have a population of 12% of the entire nation, or roughly 40 million individuals, but that makes it difficult for the economy and others. I think one standard, it would have been important for the same motion that the those in California to work to the automakers. They actually work with the federal government. But again, I've watched Democrats more focused on trying to change an outcome to an election, and then either sitting down that an election is over and work together. Look, I will work with anybody who wants to put this country first. I've watched it time and again on this floor. I've watched it at the time where we all voted together to lower the drug prices, but only to find that when the Democratic leadership took a hold of it, that they made sure it couldn't become law. There's a time for politics, but there's also a time to put it aside. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of drug prices, the White House said yesterday that you organized a meeting between President Trump and pharma. Why did you set up that meeting?
Because I want to see drug prices lowered just as I see the president. And I want to see a bill that actually lowers the price where the constituents actually feel it. I don't want to lower it by 1%. The drug prices are too high. And I want to see a bill that actually becomes law. That's why if you watch, just as I say I can work with anybody, I'll work with everybody who's participating. And I want to bring people together to solve the problem. It was a productive meeting, too. And I think there is a better chance today, after the meeting yesterday, of having drug prices lower. And this is something that the president has focused on. I give him all the credit. He doesn't care who's there. He has one goal: lower the price of drugs for all Americans. And that's what he's going to get in the end. Yes?
Paul Mitchell, a member of your leadership team, announced his retirement this week, and he cited not only the president's rhetoric that he's frustrated with, but sort of just the general toxic atmosphere on Capitol Hill. Have you heard these concerns from other members, and what is your message to members who might be considering leaving Congress for the same frustrations?
Look, let me first thank Paul. Paul is an amazing man that has accomplished so much. Being a member of Congress is one of those, but I will tell you, if you ask Paul for his resume, the very first thing he'll say is a father. The second he'll say is a husband. Successful in business, and in a business it was about education, educating people. He was beyond success in that. But he always believed in participating in making government better, making his community better. That's what made him run. He actually ran and didn't win the first time. So no, and I spent a lot of time with Paul, I spent a lot of time with the family, and he has a beautiful son, Declan. And I know at the time when I talked to Paul, the weighing family and the commitment where he's doing, we all come to that conclusion. But he has made a tremendous contribution to this country, and he will continue to. He's not leaving today. And those are all decisions on, it doesn't matter where you are on both sides of the aisle. It doesn't matter whether you just serve in Congress, whether you serve at the Board of Supervisors, whether you serve in the Senate, or where you work within government. Those are decisions that are personal or made. And I respect his decision, but I also want to thank him for his service. He's an amazing man.
The atmosphere, especially as 2020 heats up, do you think the atmosphere on Capitol Hill will cause more lawmakers to retire and flee Congress?
No, I think the reason people retire, it's their own personal decision and the time and place of where they are. Some people retire because the voters decide they retire and they still want to stay. You know, that's the makeup of our government, and that's what's so beautiful. You know, America is more than a country. America is an idea, an idea of self-governance, an idea that the power does not rest here, but it rests with the people. Unfortunately, we're having a real contest about that. This new Socialist Democratic Party thinks all the power rests with them. But we've seen from results, they're just not there. They're fighting among themselves. They can't produce anything out of committee. And now they're finding from the chief of staff of the most coveted endorsement that any Democrat who's running wants is even questioning and challenging, name me one thing that they have accomplished for America's kitchen table. The answer is easy. There isn't any.